Talk amongst yourselves. Hi, my name is Susan Kaplan. I'm very glad to see you here this afternoon. This is a really nice space to be able to read in. I'm the director of the Play It Again Senior Theater Troupe of Lifelong. We are a group of 8 people who meet weekly at Lifelong from September to May. But essentially it's September to December, and then again we start up January to May. So this is our second season of this year at Lifelong. Welcome, come in. There are green programs, I believe, in the back and in the front, if you would like one. So you're going to hear our 8 folks here each read stories that are memoirs, pieces of their life, and each semester we pick a theme, and our theme this time is mistakes. We figured we might be able to keep this theme for about a decade. We all make them, we might as well talk about them and share them. So before we hear any readings, I'd like to introduce our troupe pretty quickly, but you also have their names in front of you on your program. In the back row, we'll read, so that we'll wave. We have Emily Johnson. Next to her, Mark Silverman. And these two, as some others, have been in this group for quite a while. But next to Mark, we have John Buskin, who just joined us in September. And next to Mark, we have Deirdre Silverman. A little bit of nepotism in the background we'll talk about later. In the front row, we have Paula Toomey. And next to Paula is Jean Senegas. And then our latest arrival and addition is Valerie Evans, who's just joined us in January. And in the end of the front row, we have Patricia Frazier. Thank you for your warm welcome to them. So the way, as I said, we pick a theme, and then each of the members here goes home and decides, this time, what mistake do I really want to tell in front of all these people? And writes a story. They bring the story back, and as a group, we work on editing it and making it coherent and, ask questions of them. And when that's all done, we decide how can the rest of the troupe enhance that story? And we add bits of dialogue, little bits of song sometimes, gestures, whatever, to support and enhance the story. And if you haven't seen us before, you'll get the idea really quickly. It's also my job to decide what order these stories should be told in, and that varies, but this particular time I said, I think I'm going to take the mistakes in chronological order. And what I mean by that is the mistakes of childhood are going to come early on, and we're going to move through a number of high school mistakes onto college and adulthood, and finally have 2 that bring us much closer to our senior years. There's probably a lot more I could tell you, but I think we should get started.
Cell phones.
What?
Cell phones.
Oh, please, if you have your cell phones up, we've had some interruptions. So it would be very nice if your cell phones were silenced, thank you. It'd be nice if John would come back.
Cell phone silence. Thank you.
And I'm very, very happy to introduce our first reader, Emily Johnson.
Pride goeth before a fall. I was 9 years old, newly arrived at Sky Lake Summer Camp in Georgia. Swimming was compulsory, but we were allowed to choose our other activities. Along with kayaking and dramatics, I chose horseback riding. I had begun taking riding lessons at a stable near home that summer, and I was very excited to show off my skills. The first day, our instructor, Miss Gina, took a group of us to the camp stables where several horses were saddled and ready, tethered to the fence surrounding a large corral. Immediately, I spotted the horse I wanted to ride, a beautiful shiny black with a flowing mane and tail.
These horses are all very gentle,
Miss Gina told us.
but some are a little friskier than others.
One by one, she matched each girl to a horse that seemed to fit her ability. Finally, she untied the reins of the black horse I had my eye on.
This one's name is Zorro, and he can sometimes be a little tricky to handle.
She looked at the few of us who were left.
Have any of you had riding lessons?
My hand shot in the air.
Good. The only thing you have to know is that Zorro must always be the leader. He doesn't like it when another horse gets ahead of him. You think you can handle that?
Yes, I can handle that. Hush.
Okay then, we're off.
Miss Gina opened the gate, and with Zorro in the lead, we all paraded into the corral. We started off with walking. Miss Gina stood in the middle of the ring with a megaphone and began giving instructions. She had already shown us how to hold the reins and use them to turn the horse to the right or the left.
Sit up straight, with your heels down.
So far, so good. Zorro was behaving himself, and I felt very proud to be leading the group. After a period of walking, Miss Gina told us how to nudge our horses into a trot. This was much more fun than walking. Now we were really moving. Oh no, I could see out of the corner of my eye a large buckskin horse plodding up behind me. Stay back, I thought. But he kept coming, closer and closer. And before I knew it, that old clodhopper had taken the lead. Zorro flattened his ears back, tight against his head, a sure sign that he was angry. I pulled on the reins, trying to hold him back, but Zorro had other ideas. He burst into a gallop and started circling the corral at top speed, around and around and around. My feet flew out of the stirrups and the reins slipped from my hands. The only way I could stay on was to grab hold of Zorro's thick mane. The rest of me was airborne.
Whoa! Whoa!
I could hear Miss Gina yelling, but had no idea what she was saying. Round and round we galloped, faster and faster. The other horses got out of our way, huddling together in the center of the ring. Somehow Miss Gina managed to hustle the horses and riders and out through the gate, leaving me and Zorro alone in the corral. But Zorro showed no signs of slowing down. I thought he might keep on galloping forever, but suddenly he swerved and headed straight for the fence. This is it, I thought. I'm going to die. But instead of leaping the fence, Zorro skidded to a stop, throwing me to the ground. Miss Gina ran over, grabbed the reins, and helped me to my feet. I was bruised and trembling, but no broken bones. After the other riders dismounted and headed back to camp, Miss Gina asked me to get back on Zorro. No, I said, tears running down my face. I don't want to.
If you don't, you may be scared ever to ride again.
That didn't make any sense to me. But as long as she kept a tight grip on Zorro while leading him back to the stall, I agreed and got back on. But her little trick didn't work. I remained frightened of horses for the rest of my life. All because I had let pride get the best of me. When at 9 years old, I bragged about being able to handle an out-of-control horse. Our next reader will be Pat Frazier.
coulda, woulda, shoulda. I was in a military family and had just moved to an American Army base in Germany. That meant a new place to live, a new school, and new friends to make.
Guten Tag, Patricia.
What anticipation! But my thoughts were all about graduation and keeping my eye on the ball, so to speak. The summer before senior year was a taste of what was to come. The girls were on a softball team, and we rode by bus to play other teams. It should have been fun, but of course, I was always in the outfield and never caught a ball. I don't think that I was ever at that. This left me a little deflated about participating. Anyway, September came soon enough. Everyone settled into their studies. Most of the teachers had good attitudes and a good outlook towards us. We learned. But naturally, there were outside activities as well. In drama club, I was offered the lead in the school play.
Wow, you could have been a star.
Maybe. However, it didn't work out because I didn't want to skip lunch or bring my own, as rehearsals were during lunchtime. So I didn't take part in the play. There were dances on the weekends.
Could have danced all night.
Sure, but I was pulling all-nighters in the library instead. And there was a talent show.
Ooh, you could have been in the spotlight.
I guess, but I missed out because I didn't hear about it. My father said,
All work and no play makes Jill a dull girl.
and that was the truth. But I missed out on more. The school put on a musical
Oklahoma.
that needed people to participate.
You could have been the girl who didn't say no.
But instead, I was the girl who did say no.
What was your excuse this time?
I didn't want to find a ride home, nor do my homework on the stage set. What a blunder. That homework, especially the math, was my excuse for everything. My brother, a freshman in college, would read my letters to his friends, and they all had a good laugh over my complaint about that darn math homework. Even after I made the tennis team,
You could have aced the serve.
math kept me from joining, or so I said. In the spring, there was the Powder Puff football team.
You could have played defense.
Well, the other girls enjoyed it and were happy. What fun I missed. Once, my lack of confidence and coordination worked out for the best. Physical education was required at that time. I told the person in charge that I didn't want to take phys ed because in softball, I was always the last one chosen, and I couldn't even, and in volleyball, I could never get a basket.
Patricia, nobody ever gets a basket in volleyball.
So I got to join chorus instead, and that was no mistake.
I got a wonderful feeling. Everything's going her way.
But I wanted to get into college, so digging into my studies paid off. The school gave me a small scholarship for which I was grateful. In college, I passed math because I had studied so hard that last year in high school. So I had made it to college and acquired a degree, but at what a price. When I look back, part of me wishes that I hadn't missed out on fun. But here I am, standing in the spotlight, able to tell you my story. Maybe I should have done some things differently, but now I'll say goodbye with no regrets. Now we'll hear from Deidre Silverman, who at the time of her story was called Dee Dee.
I've been sick, so bear with me. A terrible mistake. My older sister Carla answers the telephone because I'm crying too hard to talk.
Hello?
Hello, this is Ken Jenkins, the English teacher at the high school. There's been a terrible mistake.
You bet there has.
She slams the phone down.
Why were you crying?
Why did she hang up on him?
Well, beginning in 10th grade, it was my goal to become editor-in-chief of the yearbook. That year, a friend of mine was the editor, and although it wasn't common for underclassmen, I helped him out with various tasks. I enjoyed the complexity of the project, and I knew it would look good on my college applications. But the real reason I wanted to be the editor was because of Mr. Jenkins, the yearbook advisor. I wanted him to be my mentor. Mr. Jenkins was easily the coolest teacher I knew. He was young, he was the only black teacher in the school, and he was a total intellectual snob. Once, he came into our honors English class where a bunch of us were working on the New York Times crossword puzzle.
What's a 7-letter word meaning error?
We thought we were really hot stuff for doing something so adult. Mr. Jenkins gave us a withering stare and sneered.
That is so bourgeois.
We all loved him. Each year, a girl editor and a boy editor were chosen from the incoming 12th grade students. 3 girls applied, Amy, Arlene, and me. Amy was smart, but somewhat spaced out. Arlene was very pretty. One of those rare Jewish girls with naturally blonde hair and blue eyes that everyone went nuts over, but not known as a good student. Neither of them had the yearbook experience that I had. So everyone told me I was a shoo-in, and I believed them. We didn't know what the selection process was, as students weren't involved. But we assumed that Mr. Jenkins had the final say, because the yearbook was his baby. The announcement of yearbook editors was made over the public address system at the end of school on a Friday afternoon in June of our 11th grade. The girl editor was Arlene Moskowitz. Everyone in my homeroom turned to look at me as I struggled to keep my composure. I managed to hold myself together as I made my way out of school, cheeks burning, fending off words of commiseration.
How did that happen?
Arlene?
What were they thinking?
That can't be right.
Outside, my mother, sister, and 2-year-old niece were waiting for me, planning to go for ice cream to celebrate my selection. I slammed into the car, yelled, "They chose Arlene!" and burst into tears. I cried all the way home, which made my niece cry even louder than me. My mother and sister outdid each other in expressing outrage. Most of it focused on Arlene's good looks and empty head. That just made me feel worse. And they had plenty to say about Mr. Jenkins.
So much for your precious Mr. Jenkins. If I saw him now, I'd spit in his face.
At home, I moped and cried some more. Then came that phone call from Mr. Jenkins. What had he wanted? Maybe my sister shouldn't have hung up on him.
Really?
Should we try to call him back? Would that just make things worse? The phone rang again. This time my mother answered, and again it was Mr. Jenkins. He didn't wait to be cut off. He started right in with,
Arlene is not the editor. Dee Dee is the editor.
my mother talked to him for a while to make sure of what he was saying, then handed the phone to me.
Dee Dee, I'm so sorry for the confusion. I hope you're still willing to be the editor-in-chief.
Of course I was. And it was wonderful. The yearbook turned out great. And having Mr. Jenkins as a mentor was all I hoped it would be. But what seems like a blessing can be a curse. For the rest of my life, even now, when something bad happens to me or anyone I love, I often expect a phone call or a message saying it was all a mistake, that things really went the way I wanted. I know it isn't rational and almost never happens, but the irrational hope lives on. So guess what a little part of me expected when I woke up last November 6th? It didn't work.
Trump became president.
Thank you. Now that the microphone is sterilized, we'll hear from Paula Toomey.
What teenagers learn. When I entered the teaching profession in 1971, I thought I was teaching Spanish language skills. To be sure, I taught verb conjugations, adjective agreement, the difference between the preterite and the imperfect, and I even taught the dreaded pluperfect subjunctive. But very quickly, I realized that Spanish was secondary to what I was really teaching my teenagers: values. When they made mistakes, would I teach them to learn from those mistakes? In the early 2000s, I had a designated lunch period called Dining with Toomey. Students who acted out in class were required to come in and dine with me. We would talk about their behavior, and then they wrote a brief reflection about what they did and how they could improve. Here are some essays that I saved from my students.
It is wrong to give someone the finger. It's very unladylike. And it is demeaning to all females whenever I do that. It disrupts from the learning process. I'm very ashamed that I did that. I will never do that again.
Yes, students can feel a deep sense of shame for their actions. I'm glad she thought about the consequences to herself and to others. The next reflection shows a lot of self-awareness.
Dear Mrs. Toomey, I am sorry for cheating on the test last week. It was wrong for me to do so. I should have talked to you after class so we could have worked something out. I was unprepared for my test. That was no one's fault but my own. Next time I will prepare myself and confront you like an adult about the situation. I made a mistake, and I'm truly sorry for it.
The test material was inconsequential, but the realization that there's an adult way to solve a problem is huge. The next reflection is more, well, rueful.
Trust and honesty are morals that most families use as a basis for unity. In most cases, trust and honesty come up during the teenage years. That is when the child has the opportunity to follow morals or go on instinct. In my case, I went on instinct, not morals. The funny thing is, this is the only class I have skipped, and I got in trouble for it.
I'm not sure I heard repentance here, but I was glad that the student had reflected on the concepts of trust, honesty, instincts, and morals. The next essay shows the power of words.
Yesterday, I said an inappropriate word to another student. That was being a bitch. I was angry at the other person because she made a sarcastic remark to me, so I retaliated. I apologized to her, and she forgave me. I understand that I should not have said bitch. I am sorry. You will not hear anything like that come out of my mouth again.
I love the fact that both students worked this out. Apology and forgiveness. Two powerful words. This last reflection is my favorite.
Yo, it's not good to skip Spanish class, especially when there is a sub. It shows disrespect. You can't learn if you're not there. It's also not a good idea because my mother gets really pissed off at me. She finds out, and if she does, I get grounded. And we argue. I'm lucky to be getting an education. Most people don't. This will not happen again, I think.
Well, unfortunately, it did happen again and again, but maturity takes time. Every so often, I run into these students around town or at Wegmans. They're in their late 30s now. Some are parents themselves. I wonder what advice they give their children about mistakes. Thank you. Our next speaker is John Buskin.
Hi. When I was little, my mother always said books are sacred. By the way, this is called Sometimes It Is Written. If I became a writer, I felt sure that my mother would be very proud of me. Still, the architecture school at Cornell seemed like a really good choice. I'd always been a decent artist, and I'd already been accepted at the Rhode Island School of Design. But to my adolescent 16-year-old brain, it sounded a lot cooler to say I went to Cornell than to say I went to the Rhode Island School of Design. Cornell sounded cooler. Having a specific goal, knowing what I wanted to be, reduced my anxiety about leaving home and making my way in the world. But in freshman English, a free-form writing assignment came back with an A+, and the teacher's comment that read,
Maybe you should be an informal essayist.
this demanded self-examination. Would I rather see my building built or my novel published? But my teenage brain didn't really understand that question. Architects don't build, they design. Writers don't publish, they write. Oops. But this demanded, I'm sorry. I've lost my place. I've lost the page. Later that term, I was working on a paragraph in a story I was writing about high school kids playing soccer during gym. I was describing the gawky kids who were sitting by the sidelines. One sat cross-legged, yanking out clumps of grass, and making dirt bombs that raised a small cloud of dust. The sentence really improved the piece. The gym class was now about adolescent angst. Inadvertently, I created a moment of real life, invested with subtlety and a hint of deeper meaning. And it was funny. Writing it felt even better than the A+. Writing a good sentence made me feel good, happy. I realized that it was the trailhead to the Zen
Half-wit heart.
But that set off my bullshit meter like a banshee. Humans need shelter. Books, not so much. It was fool's gold, and I was the fool. Resolutely, I altered my destiny. At the bursar's office, I picked up my Regent Scholarship check, and on my way to the bank in College Town, I bought a motorcycle. I spent that spring joyriding on my upcoming tuition. Before I had to pay the piper, I got drafted. Pugil sticks are huge, nasty Q-tips. Trainees square off with them to practice bayonet moves.
What's the spirit of the bayonet?
To kill! Two soldiers faced each other. An NCO blew a whistle and you got it on. You're supposed to fight with specific lunges. When my turn came, I was matched against a very big black soldier named Lamont. He grabbed his stick like a baseball bat and just started wailing on me.
Point! Come on! Run! Run!
It was the best of 3 kills, so the next time, I jumped the whistle and got him in the neck before he was ready.
Point! Buster!
In the 3rd round, he pummeled me again, enthusiastically delivering payback for my cheating. It was an epiphany. Viet Cong would blast me to pulp while I was still wondering if I could pull the trigger. Yet somehow I managed to survive until my discharge.
Fast forward several decades.
I was up for a writing gig with a joint venture in new media, but at the time,
The late 1980s.
it was still strange and unknown media. An online service, whatever that was, called Prodigy, was being developed by IBM, CBS, and Sears. They asked if I could create a humor section for their unprecedented pre-AOL venture. Though my computer savvy was severely lacking, they kept scheduling more interviews. Finally ready to make an offer, my principal contact asked,
Is there anything else about yourself you'd like to add?
well, after all the interviews, I guess I felt too comfortable. I thought my answer would be funny. When I was in the Army, I said flippantly, I got court-martialed. They got very serious.
I wish you had not told me that about yourself.
Apparently, corporate monoliths still avoided any whiff of the counterculture. Alice's restaurant types were not welcome. I was tainted. Ironically, though, they made me an offer. I could contribute as a non-employee. I was called an external provider. I got annual contracts, 1099 income, and no commuting. They gave me an old IBM XT computer and something called a modem, and I became a very early home worker. And the dot-com boom boosted my kids through college. The Army helped them be all they could be. As a writer, I've sometimes been really lucky and sometimes not so lucky. I think that that's what it takes. To me, bylines are like heroin. Too bad my mother never got to see any of mine. But writing and reading good sentences, that's my game. Thank you. We're going to hear from Gene Senegas now.
Microphone?
Deep down, I knew. Deep down, I knew that deer were herbivores. That is, they eat plants, not meat. But it only takes forgetting this fact to turn an interesting project into a dud. I had picked up a roadkill, a red-tailed hawk, and intended to stuff it. That is, find someone to teach me taxidermy. When I say that I picked it up, I had a plastic bag a plastic tub in the trunk of my car.
You never know when a plastic tub will come in handy.
And I placed the hawk in it and took it home. What does one do with a dead animal that one doesn't intend to bury? Put it in the freezer, of course. And there it went after I had wrapped it thoroughly in paper towels and plastic bags. Well, it lay in the freezer, ignored, for about 2 years, waiting for me to find a taxidermist. When I noticed that I wasn't even looking for one, I decided instead to harvest the hawk's skull and talons. I had found skulls and antlers in the woods, so I knew one could obtain bones by burying an animal and letting its body decay in the earth. When decomposition is complete, one digs up the remains and voila, the skull and whatever other bones one wants are ready.
Ready for what?
For displaying on a shelf. But then I imagined that the deer in my yard might dig the hawk up. And here is where I made my mistake. Even though, as I have said, deep down I knew that deer didn't eat meat, I still worried about the deer in my yard. The only thing I could think of to avoid the deer eating the hawk was to put the hawk up in a tree. So I made a cage out of fencing material with holes that were 1 inch square and secured it up in one of my backyard trees. I checked on the hawk every couple of months and was able to see it gradually disappear. What I didn't register was that it was more than the muscle tissue that was disappearing. By the end of a year, there was actually nothing left in the cage. It was completely empty.
No skull,
No talons.
no feathers, no bones of any sort.
Empty.
I had known about the process of decomposition in the earth, but what could have happened to the hawk up in the air? That was a mystery. It wasn't until several years later that someone suggested it might have been consumed by insects. And so I then realized it could have been beetles or mice. But my satisfaction at solving this mystery did not equal the disappointment with myself for forgetting that the deer in my yard, as I knew deep down, were not interested in eating my hawk. And now we'll hear from Valerie Evans.
On my own. I constantly make mistakes. It's a result of being curious and not always thinking before I do or say something. I am also a very trusting person, and that can be an invitation to be hoodwinked by others. I spent 37 years teaching middle school until last August. Then I finally retired after my friends, colleagues, and even my family told me how wonderful retirement would be.
You'll love it.
Best thing I ever did.
No work.
No more clocks.
My friends' encouraging comments about retirement included all the things I love.
Theater trips.
Wine tasting.
You could even write a book.
Who could argue with that kind of inspiration?
So I did it. I retired. I endured the filling out of endless forms and making endless financial decisions. To be honest, I had worked 3 years more than I needed in order to avoid all that paperwork. When I was working, many of my daily decisions involved crisis intervention and a great deal of stress. The future peace and joy I imagined got me to finally bite the retirement bullet.
Isn't it great?
Fantasy?
It's great.
You're on your own.
All that time to yourself.
You'll love it.
Reality? I went from speaking to hundreds of people every day to talking to my 5-pound dog all day. I have to make, if I want to see and speak to other people, I have to make a plan and decide on an activity. That's a lot of effort no one talks about. No one told me that I'd have to make new friends.
Retired friends.
Turns out many of those friends are busy being grandparents. And my daughter, she refuses to do her part to make me a grandmother. So yes, I'm on my own. I have no life partner to worry about or get annoyed at. I am finally in full control of my TV remote and thermostat. I can decide to have ice cream for breakfast. Yes, I'm on my own. Most of my old friends are still liberals, but our leaders have erected an unbreachable wall that keeps so many out. The peace and joy I was expecting hasn't been able to break through yet. My advice? Figure out a routine, because unfettered free time is not all it's cracked up to be. Don't believe that exciting travel is in your future, because as soon as you retire, your kitchen plumbing or your personal plumbing will give out. Either way, your finances take a huge hit. You may even tear up when people ask,
What do you do?
I answer, mostly try to figure out what to do with my life. You see, I'm on my own. Retirement requires even more guts and effort than teaching middle school. I had to step out of my comfort zone and embrace new things. I'm not going to tell you you'll love it. You might not, but it does get better. It takes a surprising amount of time and work, but eventually it gets better. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Well, I was so excited by your applause. I forgot that our final reader is Mark Silver.
No direction home. As I contemplate my life, I realize I've never been someone who dwells on missteps or errors. At 82, focusing on the large gaps can become an exercise in alternate realities, or the land of what ifs. The truth is, the future pivots when you make an important decision. For me, college, marriage, children, jobs, where I'm living. This is rare. There is rarely a chorus of critics at my side. But I'll risk a second guess or two as I share some of my secrets.
Talk about your decision to go to college in St. Louis at Washington University.
Well, yes, I did make that choice. Filled out the forms and got the tuition check from my parents. But at the mailbox on my corner in Brooklyn, I chickened out. Tore up the envelope. St. Louis was too far away. Had I gone to the Midwest, so much would have changed. This very moment would be erased.
And 5 years later, what about marrying Deirdre? Any problem?
For sure, there was fierce opposition from her parents. They wanted her to match up with that young doctor, someone more established, not someone who just graduated. And I had no money. They even checked out my family and found out they had no money. I suppose I could have fled the battle after her mother said,
We never wanted this for you.
But the romance prevailed, and here we are, 60 years later, still married.
Fine. What about leaving New York City? Ditching your job? Leaving the city life?
Okay, it was the late 60s, a time of chaos. We impulsively threw over everything we'd been working for years. We gave away our books and records. We gave up new jobs, left the city forever. But you have to try to understand. That life, the noise, the clatter, the war in Vietnam, it was too much. Also, a fire at a summer rental, we lost our cats. It was too much. Despite the fact that we had finally succeeded in achieving everything we had been working for years. I know it sounds crazy, but maybe I just couldn't handle success.
Years later, you quit a tenured teaching position at Ithaca College. Again, you refused to accept success, right?
The college gig had become tedious. The students were interested in rote lectures rather than real interaction. So I moved on to create a new career. It's rewarding, assisting adolescents, preschool children, and their parents.
And now, what about your decision to leave the farm that had been your home for 50 years? Wasn't that foolish?
No, it was a wise choice. We didn't have the same energy. We needed the money to fund our later years. Hey, the tea leaves said, get out. And even though that farm was a place of wonder and magic, we moved on. Of course, it was foolish to leave our home, but all my yesterdays celebrate my willingness to question the right choice. And mistakes ahead, why the hell not?
When we performed this at McGraw House, a woman, we just did it like this, and this woman stood up with a t-shirt from the audience that said, "Je ne regrette rien." It was like fabulous. She said she used it in her teaching. Anyway.
Thank you
They're
so
great.
much.
And if any of you feel like you have terrific stories to tell, this happens twice a year. We'd love to see you at Lifelong, and thank you so much for coming today.
Don't you do this one more time on the 15th?
Yes, Thursday we will perform the exact same thing again at Library Place.
Yes, right near Lifelong.
Thank you, and she's an audience plan, but very well done.